Cade stumbled through the desolate streets, the dust of 1,000 crumbled buildings swirling around him like ghosts of the past. His mind was a blur of loss, friends, comrades, family, all gone in the blink of an eye. The weight of their deaths, the faces of the fallen Vanguard soldiers who had fought alongside him, hung heavy in his chest. He couldn't shake the image of their final moments, their courage, their sacrifice. How had it come to this? How had humanity's finest warriors been so utterly crushed? He paused for a moment at the edge of the ruins, looking out over what had once been a bustling metropolis, now a smoldering graveyard. The alien invaders had made Earth unrecognizable. The skyline, once a testament to human achievement, was now a jagged silhouette against the darkened sky, broken and incomplete. The air was thick with smoke, and a suffocating silence hung over the land. There were no sounds of bustling life, no voices crying out in defiance. Only the low hum of alien machinery as it continued to harvest Earth's resources, oblivious to the lives it had erased. The Xanthari were everywhere. Their troops patrolled the streets in disciplined ranks, their towering, insect-like forms casting long shadows over the ruins. The civilians who had survived the initial assault were little more than livestock now, forced into labor camps to extract Earth's remaining wealth, its minerals, its water, its very essence, so the aliens could use it to fuel their empire. Humanity, the once proud species that had explored the stars and built civilizations, was now reduced to the status of an afterthought. Cade's fingers clenched around the hilt of his broken blade. His hands shook with the need to strike back. The resistance was small, its chances slim, but it was all they had left. It was all he had left. He had made a vow to those who had died with him on the battlefield. He would not let their deaths be in vain. He would not let the Xanthari erase them from history, not while he still had breath in his body. Turning back to his group, Cade motioned for them to follow. The survivors, less than 100 strong, were waiting in the shadows, hidden among the ruins. Some were former soldiers, others just ordinary civilians who had learned to fight in the harsh new world. They had no grand plans, no overwhelming strength, just sheer willpower, and they were all looking to him for guidance, even though he felt as lost as they did. "Gather everything," Cade ordered, his voice hoarse but firm. "We leave in 20 minutes. The Xanthari won't give us another chance. We need to find shelter, weapons, whatever we can use. We're not finished yet." There were nods of agreement, grim faces set with determination. The mission was clear: survive and fight back. The Vanguard had fallen, but humanity's spirit remained unbroken. There was still hope in the hearts of the people. There was still fire in the eyes of those who had lost everything. As Cade led them through the rubble, he found a strange sense of purpose stirring within him. It wasn't about victory. It wasn't about reclaiming Earth in one grand swoop. It was about survival, and not just for them, but for every human who had been enslaved, every colony that had fallen, every family that had been torn apart. The fire of rebellion, though small, was beginning to burn again. And this time, there would be no stopping it. The ruins of Earth were no longer silent. Beneath the weight of Xanthari occupation, every movement was a whisper, every decision a gamble. As Cade and his small group of survivors made their way through the wreckage of their former cities, every step felt like it carried the weight of humanity's collective loss. They were ghosts, wandering through the ashes of a civilization that had once ruled the stars. Cade had been a soldier, a leader, someone who once commanded vast fleets. Now, he was reduced to scavenging the ruins for anything that might help them survive. His team, mostly former Vanguard soldiers, hardened in combat, moved with the grim precision of a military operation. They knew that every second counted. The Xanthari patrolled the streets, their alien ships casting long shadows in the sky, hunting for any remnants of resistance. The survivors had become experts in avoiding detection, slipping through cracks in the landscape like ghosts in the dark. As they navigated the ruins, Cade couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away. They had no clear plan, no allies to turn to, only the hope that somewhere, deep within the broken infrastructure of Earth, there was something, anything, that could turn the tide in their favor. "Captain, we've reached the old base," Sergeant Lena Dre, one of the few remaining soldiers who had served under Cade, called from the front. She was a tall woman, her face hardened by the loss of so many comrades. Her eyes, though, still held the fire of a fighter. "It's a long shot, but there's a chance we might find something useful inside." Cade nodded in signal to the others to move forward. The base, once a vital military stronghold during the early days of the war, had been abandoned for months. It was now little more than a skeleton of its former self, half buried beneath rubble and overgrowth. But Cade's gut told him that there was something there, something that could help them in their struggle. The team fanned out, carefully avoiding the wide streets where Xanthari drones regularly patrolled. They moved through alleyways and crumbling underpasses, making their way to the base's hidden entrance. It was a tense, silent journey. Every noise felt like an alarm. Every shadow seemed to conceal an enemy. Cade's senses were on high alert, the same instincts that had kept him alive in countless battles, now guiding him through this new, more insidious war. As they reached the base, Lena motioned to Cade. "This is it," she said softly. She knelt beside a rusted door embedded into the side of a concrete wall. With a grunt, she pried it open, revealing a dark corridor beyond. The air inside was thick with dust, the smell of decay and abandonment. Cade could almost hear the echoes of the soldiers who had once called this place home. He wondered how many had fought and died here, hoping for the day when they could turn the tide against the invaders. That hope had died along with them. But now that hope would live again. They moved through the base, clearing rooms, searching for anything useful. Finally, after hours of searching, they came across a large, sealed vault hidden deep within the structure. Cade's heart quickened as he approached. If there was anything worth finding on this forsaken world, it would be here. Lena scanned the vault's controls. "It's locked tight, but I think I can hack it." As the hum of her device filled the air, Cade felt a sense of anticipation building. This could be their chance to turn the tide. They had nothing left to lose, and in that vault could lie the weapons or technology that could change everything. Seconds ticked by like hours, and just as the tension reached its peak, the vault door clicked open. Inside, there were rows upon rows of long-forgotten weaponry and advanced technology, the remnants of humanity's military past. But one item in particular caught Cade's eye. It was a dark, sleek device, sealed in a transparent case, an object that could have been pulled from the pages of legend, the Aegis Core. His pulse quickened as he moved toward it. The Aegis Core had been rumored to be the key to turning the war in humanity's favor. It was an advanced weapon, capable of enhancing any form of military technology with devastating efficiency. The rumors had always seemed too good to be true until now. "This is it," Cade whispered, almost in disbelief. "This is what we've been waiting for." Lena grinned, her eyes alight with the fire of renewed purpose. "Let's take it then. Let's turn the tide." Cade nodded grimly. The fight was far from over. But for the first time since the fall of the Vanguard, a glimmer of hope sparked in his chest. The Aegis Core could be their salvation, and with it, humanity's fight was just beginning. The Aegis Core sat in the center of the abandoned vault like a dormant beast, its sleek, dark surface gleaming faintly under the dim light. Cade could hardly believe it was real. In a war that had stripped Earth of its defenses and hope, this could be their salvation, a weapon capable of altering the course of history. But the enormity of what they had just uncovered wasn't lost on him. They weren't just holding a weapon, they were holding humanity's future. "We've got it," Lena said, her voice barely above a whisper, as though speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile reality of their find. Her fingers hovered above the core's sealed casing. "Now what?" Cade glanced around at the team. They were exhausted, hungry, and battle-worn, but their eyes gleamed with the same fire that had carried them through the worst of the war. Hope was a dangerous thing, but right now, it was all they had. "We take it back to base," Cade ordered. "This isn't just a weapon. It's something that could change the whole war. But we need to understand how it works first. We need to get out of here without being noticed." The team nodded, their expressions resolute. The base was a few miles out, but getting back to their hidden headquarters would be no easy task. Every step they took would be fraught with danger. The Centhari had already proved they were merciless, and their patrols had become even more frequent as they consolidated their control over Earth. As they made their way back through the darkened streets, Cade felt the weight of the core in his hands. It was oddly cold, despite the warmth of the surrounding ruins. He couldn't shake the sense that they had just touched something far greater than they could comprehend. There were too many unanswered questions, too many unknowns. But for the first time in months, there was a spark of something else, confidence. The trip back to base was a nerve-wracking ordeal. The Centhari drones patrolled in near-silent formations, scanning the streets with an eerie precision. The survivors had learned to move in the shadows, relying on the broken remnants of Earth's infrastructure to shield them from view. Every corner was an ambush waiting to happen. Every alleyway could lead to a squadron of alien soldiers. Every moment spent outside felt like an eternity. Cade's mind was focused solely on one thing, survival. But something gnawed at the back of his mind. The core had been hidden for a reason. What if it wasn't just a weapon? What if it was something far more dangerous, something that even the Vanguard had deemed too risky to use? When they finally reached the safe house, a half-collapsed building tucked away in the forgotten corners of the city, Cade ordered everyone to settle in while Lena and a few others worked on securing the area. He took a moment to examine the Aegis core, running his fingers along the casing. The hum beneath his fingertips felt almost alive. It was as if the weapon itself was waiting for something or someone to unlock its potential. Lena returned a few minutes later, her face grim. "I've been scanning the area. The Centhari have increased their patrols near here. They're getting closer." Cade's mind raced. They couldn't stay here long, not with the enemy so close. But they also couldn't leave the core behind. If they didn't figure out how to use it, they might as well be giving the enemy a free weapon to turn on them. "Get to work on the core," Cade said, handing it to Lena. "I'll keep an eye out for trouble." Lena nodded and set the core down on a makeshift table, carefully connecting the device to a series of old, scavenged terminals. "It's going to take time," she said, her fingers flying over the keys. "But if there's any chance of getting this thing operational, we'll find it." Cade watched her work, his mind heavy with the stakes of their mission. It was clear now that they weren't just survivors anymore. They were the beginning of something bigger. The spark of rebellion that had been ignited in the ashes of their defeat was starting to burn brighter. But time was running out. The Centhari were closing in, and the core, whatever it truly was their last chance. If they could unlock its secrets, they might just have a fighting chance. But if they failed, Earth's future would be sealed in the hands of an alien empire, and humanity would fade into memory. The room was silent, save for the soft clicking of Lena's fingers on the keyboard as she worked tirelessly to unlock the Aegis core's secrets. The dim light from a broken overhead bulb flickered intermittently, casting long shadows across the cracked walls. Cade paced back and forth, his thoughts churning like a storm. Every passing second felt like an eternity. The weight of the core in his mind pressed heavily on his chest. They had barely settled, and when the first signs of the Centhari closing in had begun, it was only a matter of time before the invaders found their hideout. Cade's mind kept returning to the core. They couldn't afford to fail here. This wasn't just a weapon, it was a lifeline for humanity. If Lena couldn't unlock it, or worse, if the Centhari got their hands on it, Earth's last hope would vanish. "Almost there," Lena murmured, her voice steady but strained. Sweat beaded on her brow as she adjusted the wires connected to the terminals. The core hummed quietly, as though responding to her touch. The encryption's unlike anything I've ever seen, but I think I can crack it. It's just a matter of time. Cade's eyes darted toward the window. Outside, the streets were eerily quiet. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, that the Xanthari were already aware of their location. The alien presence had always felt distant, until now. It was as if they were growing more attuned to humanity's movements, sensing their desperation, their struggle. Lena continued to work, her face etched with concentration. Her fingers flew over the keys, decoding sequences and shifting data. Her sharp mind was their best chance at figuring out the core, but Cade knew time was running out. "Lena, we need a plan if they find us," Cade said, his voice low but urgent. "We can't stay here long. If they close in, we'll be sitting ducks." "I know," Lena replied, not looking up, "but I'm telling you, this core, it's different. It's not just a weapon. It's a network, I think. There's something here, something that could connect our forces across the entire planet if we can get it online." Cade's brow furrowed. "A network?" "It's designed to amplify existing systems," Lena explained. "A weapon? Yes, but also a communication hub. A way to link everything we have left into one force. It's the key to coordinating resistance efforts globally." Cade's heart quickened. If we can activate it, if we can unlock it and integrate it with Earth's remaining tech, we might be able to synchronize everything. Every remaining soldier, every civilian resistance cell, everything could work together in perfect coordination. But it's not just a flip of a switch, Captain. This is beyond anything we've ever faced. The weight of Lena's words settled like a stone in Cade's stomach. They had no idea what they were dealing with, no concept of the full extent of the core's power. It could be humanity's greatest asset, or it could be a ticking time bomb. Suddenly, a noise shattered the silence. A faint sound, footsteps, distant but unmistakable, echoed through the broken walls of the building. Cade froze, his senses on high alert. He motioned for Lena to stop, his eyes locked on hers. She nodded, her expression tight with tension. The sound grew louder, the distinct, mechanical hum of the Xanthari's patrol drones drawing closer. "Shit," Cade muttered under his breath. He crouched low, signaling the others to get into position. Lena scrambled to secure the core, hiding it under a pile of broken equipment. They didn't have much time. Cade peered through a crack in the wall, his pulse pounding in his ears. Xanthari patrol was moving down the street. 3 of them, their insectoid bodies gliding effortlessly across the broken pavement, scanning the area with their advanced sensors. Cade's hand tightened around the hilt of his blade. There was no way they could outrun them. "Lena, get that core hidden," Cade whispered urgently. "I'll hold them off." Lena shook her head, her voice sharp. "We don't fight them, Cade. We need to survive." He didn't argue. They couldn't afford a confrontation, not with the Xanthari in their current state. Cade motioned for everyone to fall back into the deeper shadows of the building, hearts racing as the patrol closed in. They had to remain silent, blend into the darkness. One wrong move, and they'd be finished. The Xanthari drew nearer, their mandibles clicking with an unsettling rhythm, their sensors scanning the area with precision. Cade held his breath, praying that they wouldn't detect their presence. As the patrol passed, Cade's body tensed, waiting for the inevitable. It felt like the world was holding its breath, every second dragging on longer than the last. Finally, the sounds of their movement faded, the drones moving further down the street. Cade exhaled slowly. "We need to go now." "Lena, how much longer?" "Just a few more minutes," she replied, her voice steady despite the threat outside. They were running out of time, but for the first time since the fall of Earth, Cade felt something he hadn't felt in months, a fleeting sense of hope. The moment the Xanthari patrol passed, a heavy silence descended upon the room. Cade's heart pounded in his chest, his eyes flicking from shadow to shadow as he ensured no movement betrayed their position. The tension was unbearable. Every creak of the building's weakening frame felt like a gunshot in the stillness. When he finally allowed himself to breathe again, it was a shallow, strained exhale. The worst had passed, but they couldn't afford another mistake. "Lena," he whispered urgently, "how much longer?" "I'm in," she said, her voice barely audible above the whirring hum of the core. She looked up, her face lit by the faint glow of the terminal screen. "It's functional, but we need to get it connected to a satellite uplink, or we won't be able to broadcast anything." Cade nodded sharply. The first hurdle had been cleared. The Aegis core was no longer a mystery. It was a weapon, a communication hub, a key to uniting the scattered remnants of humanity. But unlocking its potential wasn't a simple task. The uplink was miles away, deep in the heart of enemy-controlled territory, and the journey would be perilous. "We can't stay here long," Cade said, checking his weapons, making sure his blade was secure. "The Xenthari will be back before we know it. We need to move fast, get to that uplink, and get this thing working." Lena quickly packed the core into a reinforced crate. "I'll need to keep monitoring it while we're on the move," she said, her tone resolute. "It's risky, but we can't waste any more time. If we fail to get the uplink, we're back at square one." "Then we don't fail," Cade replied, his voice a low growl. "Let's move." The group emerged from the building, moving quickly but cautiously. Cade took point, scanning every corner, every rooftop for signs of Xenthari activity. The streets were eerily quiet, the occasional drone sweeping overhead like a vulture searching for carrion. The city was nothing but a graveyard now, a silent testament to their defeat. But as Cade's eyes locked on the horizon, the glimmer of hope from the Aegis core pushed back against the darkness. Humanity was still alive, still breathing. There was a chance to win this war. As they approached the outskirts of the city, Lena's pace quickened. She was clearly anxious to reach the uplink site. Her fingers drummed against the crate, her thoughts racing as fast as her feet. "If we can connect the core to the satellite network," she muttered to herself, "we can trigger the signal and begin linking all resistance movements, coordinating attacks, sharing intel, cutting off supply lines." It's a weapon, yes, but more than that. It's a system, an infrastructure that can fight back. Cade understood now. This was more than just reclaiming Earth's surface. This was about giving humanity a voice, a united front. If they succeeded, they wouldn't just be fighting for survival anymore. They'd be fighting for victory. But as they neared the satellite station, Cade's nerves flared. The area was heavily guarded, Xenthari drones hovering in the air, patrolling the perimeter with military precision. They had to move undetected, or all of this would be for nothing. Cade motioned for the group to stop, his mind racing through possibilities. "We'll have to go through the tunnels," he said, his voice low. "It'll take longer, but we'll avoid the patrols." Lena's face tightened in apprehension. "The tunnels are unstable. The Xenthari have reinforced their positions down there. It's a risk." "I know," Cade replied, "but it's the only option we've got." He led the team toward the tunnel entrance, a dark, crumbling access point long abandoned by the city's residents. The air inside was dank, and the walls felt like they might cave in at any moment, but they pressed on, moving quickly through the shadows. Cade's ears rang with the sound of their footsteps echoing against the stone, every sound a reminder of how close they were to failure. The further they went, the colder and more oppressive the tunnels became. The light from their small flashlights barely illuminated the path ahead, but it was enough. Every inch felt like it was taking them deeper into enemy territory. Cade's grip on his weapon tightened. They had to reach the uplink, or their hope would die in these tunnels. Just as the team neared the heart of the underground system, an unsettling noise cut through the silence, the distinct hum of Xenthari machinery. Cade froze, his eyes locked onto Lena, who was already reading the sensor feed on her device. She swore under her breath. "Drones," she whispered. "We're being tracked." The walls of the tunnel were suddenly far too close. The air felt thick, charged with danger. Cade knew the next moments could be their last. "Get ready," he muttered to the team. "Stay low. We can't afford to be caught." The Xenthari were closing in. Time was up. The low hum of the Xenthari drones grew louder with each passing second, a mechanical heartbeat that pulsed through the tunnel walls. Cade's instincts kicked in. The team had barely made it halfway down the dark, damp passage when the threat became tangible. The enemy was close, too close, and they had no cover here. "We're being hunted," Cade muttered under his breath. His eyes flicked to the rest of the team. Lena was scanning her device, eyes flickering between the readings, but her face was tight with worry. "We can't outrun them in here," Lena whispered. "They'll catch us before we even get close to the uplink." Cade didn't need to be told. The tight, winding tunnels offered no space to maneuver, no way to avoid a direct confrontation. His eyes darted around, looking for any escape. The cold stone walls closed in around them, and the dim light from their flashlights only made the shadows feel thicker, more oppressive. "We need to hide," Cade said urgently, pulling Lena and the others into a small alcove in the wall. They flattened against the damp stone, trying to still their breaths. Each heartbeat felt like thunder, each exhale louder than the last. The sound of the drums grew louder, closer. Cade's hand tightened on the hilt of his blade. The Xenthari were relentless in their pursuit, their sensors so advanced that escaping them was a near impossibility. There was no telling how many drones were out there, but the hum was unmistakable, probably more than just a few. "They're scanning for movement," Lena said, her voice tight with tension. "If we make even the slightest noise—" "We stay still," Cade finished, his voice low. "No matter what, we wait for them to pass." The minutes stretched into hours, the stillness of the tunnel suffocating. Cade's mind raced, weighing their options. If they were discovered, they wouldn't just be risking the mission, they'd be risking their lives. There was no backup, no plan B. They either succeeded or they died here, in the darkness, with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. Finally, the drones passed, their mechanical clicks receding as they moved further down the tunnel. The faintest sigh of relief rippled through the group. Cade didn't move immediately. He wanted to be sure. The last thing they needed was to spring into action too soon, only to be caught in a trap. When the last drone's hum finally faded into the distance, Cade stood up slowly, signaling for the team to follow. They moved with renewed urgency, each step heavier than the last. The closer they got to the uplink station, the more exposed they became. Another 20 minutes passed, and the familiar whirring of drones began again. This time, they weren't as close. The team pressed forward, but their pace had slowed, the weight of their mission growing heavier with every step. "There," Lena said suddenly, her voice a mix of relief and anxiety. She pointed to a rusted, reinforced door at the end of the tunnel. "That's it, the uplink." Cade didn't hesitate. He motioned for the others to take position as he approached the door. The sound of their footsteps was almost deafening in the stillness, but he couldn't afford to stop now. Lena quickly moved to the terminal, pulling out a portable data device. Her hands moved faster than Cade thought possible as she interfaced with the uplink system. "I'm in. Just need a few seconds to get the signal flowing to the core." Cade stood guard, his senses sharp as ever, but even he couldn't shake the dread crawling down his spine. The Xenthari were still out there. The longer they spent in one place, the more vulnerable they became. Seconds felt like hours as Lena worked, her fingers flying across the device. Come on," she muttered, sweat beading on her forehead. Her breath was shallow, but there was no time for hesitation. Cade's hand gripped the hilt of his blade again. He was waiting for the sound of approaching drones, the heavy footsteps of the Xenthari closing in once more. He couldn't shake the feeling that the enemy was already aware of their location. They were too close. Then, suddenly, a sharp beat broke the silence. "I've got it!" Lena exclaimed, her eyes wide with triumph. The data was flowing, the uplink transmitting the signal back to the core. It was alive, pulsing with a faint blue glow. "We're connected. It's working." Cade didn't allow himself to relax, not yet. They still weren't out of danger. "How long until the core's full capabilities are online?" he asked, eyes scanning the surroundings once again. "Soon," Lena said, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling in the air. "It's syncing with the remaining resistance networks. We'll have control soon, but we need to move fast." Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed through the tunnel once more, louder this time. "They're coming," Cade said. "We need to go now." Lena's fingers worked faster. "It's almost done, just a few more seconds." But Cade knew time had run out. He turned to the others, his eyes hard. "Get ready." The Excentheri were closing in fast, and they wouldn't have much time to escape. The faint hum of the uplink system was now the only sound in the chamber, a strange, almost sacred rhythm that stood in stark contrast to the chaos unfolding outside. Cade's heart raced in his chest, his mind screaming for action as the footsteps of the Excentheri echoed closer, their movement methodical, too precise. The light from Lena's device flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls as she worked furiously to stabilize the connection. "Just a few more seconds," Lena whispered, her voice tight with strain. Sweat trickled down her face as she keyed in commands at a dizzying pace. Her hands were shaking, but her resolve was unwavering. The core was almost fully sensed, and the resistance, humanity's final hope, was about to be unleashed. Cade didn't have the luxury of patience. He glanced back toward the tunnel entrance, his senses sharp. The sound of the approaching drones was unmistakable. They were closing in fast. He could already hear the unmistakable whirring of their wings, the low, insectoid clicks of their mandibles. There was no time left. If they didn't leave now, the mission would fail. "How long until it's fully operational?" Cade asked, keeping his voice low and urgent, his eyes darting back to Lena. 30 seconds, she replied, not looking up, her face drawn with exhaustion. "I can't guarantee we'll have full access, but it's enough. The uplink is established, and we can start transmitting data. It's more than we had a few hours ago." Cade nodded, his mind racing. They were standing on the edge of a precipice, and all it would take was one mistake, one slip, and everything they'd worked for would be lost. He turned to the others. "Prepare yourselves. We're going to have to fight our way out." The resistance fighters nodded in grim silence, their weapons at the ready. They had no illusions about the difficulty of the task ahead. They had one shot at survival, and there was no room for hesitation. Lena's hands stilled for a brief moment as the uplink completed its final transmission. The light from the core flashed a brilliant blue, then dimmed. She looked up, her face a mixture of relief and trepidation. "It's done," Lena said, her voice almost in disbelief. "The core is active. It's transmitting data to every resistance cell across the globe. Coordinated attacks, intel sharing, everything. We've just turned the tide." Cade exhaled slowly, the weight of their success settling over him like a heavy cloak. It wasn't enough yet. They weren't out of danger, but they had done it. They had reclaimed a piece of the future. Before he could say another word, a sharp, menacing click echoed through the tunnel, followed by the unmistakable buzz of the Excentheri drones. They were closer now, their cold, calculating presence more pronounced. Cade's hand shot to his blade, his jaw clenched in determination. "We move now," he said, his voice low and commanding. "Stay close and keep your heads down." The group sprinted for the exit, the weight of the core slowing them down. Cade's mind worked furiously. The Excentheri were everywhere, patrolling the surface, watching from above. They couldn't afford to be caught now. He knew their only chance was to make it back to the surface and into the city's ruins, where their resistance network might provide the distraction they needed to escape. As they neared the tunnel's exit, the buzzing of the drones became a constant, oppressive sound. Cade glanced back at the others, his eyes locked with Lena's, and he could see the exhaustion in her face, the burden of what they had just done. "Ready?" he asked. Leva nodded, but her lips were pressed into a thin line. There was no time for anything more than that. With a deep breath, Cade moved forward, his eyes scanning every shadow, every movement. They couldn't afford any mistakes now. The first drone appeared in the tunnel entrance, its multifaceted eyes scanning the darkness. Cade dove into the shadows, signaling the others to do the same. The drone hovered past them, its sensors sweeping over the area. The team held their breath, blending into the darkness. It seemed like an eternity, but finally, the drone moved past. Cade signaled the all clear, "We're out of the tunnel. Keep moving." They emerged into the cold, empty streets of the city, the once vibrant cityscape now a war zone of broken buildings and abandoned structures. The air was thick with the stench of destruction, and Cade's eyes scanned the skyline for signs of Xanthari. But as they moved deeper into the ruins, something changed. A distant explosion rattled the ground beneath their feet, followed by the unmistakable sounds of resistance forces making their move. Humanity was fighting back. "The signal's working," Lena said, her voice a breath of relief. "We've done it, Cade. The fight's not over, but it's begun." Cade's eyes narrowed as he took in the sight of the flames rising in the distance, the echo of gunfire reverberating through the streets. He could hear the voices of the resistance in the distance, rallying to the cause. The core's activation had started the chain reaction, but the real battle was only beginning. The fight for Earth had entered a new phase, and this time, humanity had a fighting chance. The distant roar of explosions vibrated through the shattered streets, the ground trembling underfoot as fire lit up the horizon. The resistance was making its presence known, attacking key Xanthari positions with the newly acquired intelligence from the Aegis core. Humanity's pulse had quickened. The war had not ended, but it had taken a sharp turn. Cade's team moved quickly through the ruins, ducking between collapsed buildings and crumbling walls. The core, safely secured in its reinforced crate, felt heavier now, not from its physical weight, but from the promise it carried. Humanity was no longer fractured and disorganized. They now had a chance to unite, to retaliate in ways they hadn't thought possible. "Is it really working?" Leva asked, her voice faintly disbelieving as she kept her eyes on the glowing screen of her portable device, constantly monitoring the core's transmissions. "Is this really happening?" "It's happening," Cade replied, his voice low but firm. The firelight danced in his eyes, igniting the embers of hope that had long been buried under the rubble of their fallen cities. "We have the momentum now. We just need to keep moving, keep fighting." But the joy of their success was short-lived. As they rounded a corner, the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the alley. Cade's hand instinctively went to his blade, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the street ahead. Xanthari soldiers were emerging from the shadows, flanked by towering mech units, their chitinous forms gleaming under the pale light of the burning city. Lena froze, her fingers moving instinctively over her device to shut it down, but it was too late. The Xanthari had already spotted them. The mechanized beasts began to close in with deadly precision, their eyes glowing red as they locked onto their targets. "There's no time," Cade said, pulling Lena into cover behind a collapsed structure. "Get the core to the extraction point. I'll hold them off." But Lena started to protest. "No arguments," Cade snapped, his voice sharp. "We've come too far to lose everything now." He met the eyes of the others, who nodded grimly in understanding. They knew their role. There was no turning back now. The Xanthari forces were closing in fast, their weapons charging with deadly intent. Cade's heart raced, but his mind was calm. His training, his experience in battle, kicked in as he moved into position. The team had made it this far, and he wasn't about to let the Xanthari tear it all down. The first shot rang out from the Xanthari's energy rifles, its blue beam searing through the air. Cade moved in a blur, ducking behind cover and returning fire with his own plasma blaster. The energy beams collided with debris, sending shrapnel scattering. He could feel the heat of the blasts even from a distance, but there was no time to hesitate. He shouted at Lena again, louder this time. "Go, now!" Lena hesitated for a moment longer, but then, with a final glance at Cade, she and the rest of the team bolted toward the extraction point. The core had to be delivered. That was the priority now. It was the only way they could truly bring humanity together. Cade could hear the heavy stomps of the mechs getting closer. He moved with the precision of a seasoned fighter, taking down one enemy soldier after another, using every trick he knew to keep the Centauri distracted. But the odds were against him. The drones overhead were already starting to circle, and there were too many soldiers on the ground. As the last of his team disappeared into the shadows toward the extraction point, Cade knew this was the moment he had been preparing for. His death, if it came, would be the catalyst for the future. He was willing to sacrifice everything if it meant humanity's survival. With one last look at the retreating figures of his comrades, Cade charged into the open, firing his weapon at the advancing Centauri forces. Energy beams flashed all around him, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. He had to buy them time. Then, in the blink of an eye, an explosion ripped through the street, a blinding light enveloping Cade, the shockwave knocking him off his feet. His vision blurred as the sound of the blast reverberated in his ears. When he opened his eyes again, he saw only a haze of smoke and fire. The world had gone silent. But the core had made it. Lena and the others had reached the extraction point, and humanity's fight had only just begun.